All right, so let's start with this big development that has just come in the last hour, where the American President Donald Trump has announced a 10-day-long ceasefire in Lebanon. And the announcement has come after the American president had a phone call with Lebanon's President Joseph Aoun and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The American president posted on his Truth social account that he will invite the Lebanese president and Netanyahu to the White House for the first meaningful talks since 1983. The ceasefire will come into effect from 2100 hours GMT on Thursday. Now, the American president further added that Vice President J.D. Vance, the Secretary of State Marco Rubio and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Dan Kane will now work with Israel and Lebanon for a lasting peace. And this comes in the backdrop of some heavy exchange of fire between the Israelis, who have invaded into Lebanon in a bid to try and take over territory all the way till the Litani River. Hezbollah says that it has struck multiple Israeli military targets in recent hours. One of the key attacks apparently targeted an Israeli military gathering. Hezbollah is using some kind of heavy artillery-style shelling against Israel, and the images released by the group show some artillery guns in use. The use of such weapons reflects both Hezbollah's range and also its heavy combat capability. Now, Israel, remember, has carried out some widespread bombings across Lebanon, especially in Beirut and also in the southern part of Lebanon, targeting what it claims is Hezbollah infrastructure. According to the Israelis, about 200 targets have been bombed in just the last 24 hours. The IDF has also released more footage claiming continued bombings on Hezbollah positions and warning that operations will intensify further. Now, following the ceasefire announcement, the Israeli Prime Minister convened an urgent security cabinet call.
अंदाज में मुज़ाकरात के
And WION's correspondent from New York, Susan Tehrani, has sent us this report. Let's listen in.
A social media post, President Trump has confirmed that he has spoken both to the Lebanese president and the Israeli prime minister, and that both leaders are on board. He has directed Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio, along with the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, General Dan Kane, to work together towards what he calls a quote-unquote lasting peace. Now, this comes after the two sides held their first direct talks in 34 years in Washington, D.C., led by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Trump is framing this as another win for his administration, saying, quote-unquote, let's get it done. Now, the clock starts at 5 p.m. EST, and whether or not the guns actually go silent is the main question many diplomats, but also residents of both Israel and Lebanon, are asking.
All right, now bear in mind that we are yet to hear from the Iranian side, and the Israeli Prime Minister has, of course, convened a cabinet meeting about the next step in this after Donald Trump announced the ceasefire. And to put all of this in perspective, we're joined on the broadcast by Mr. Bill Roger, who's a senior fellow at the FDD and also the editor of FDD's Long War Journal. Mr. Roger, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on WION. The question that I want to start off with is this. It is Donald Trump, the American president, who's announced this ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon for a period of 10 days. How do you think this changes the prospect of peace on the Iran front? That is to say, will a second leg of negotiations now happen between Iran and the United States because of this ceasefire that Trump has announced in Lebanon?
Well, I do think, well, first of all, the ceasefire would not be between Israel and Lebanon. It would be between Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah operates as a state within a state and attacks Israel. That is why the Israelis have responded and struck at Lebanese positions. This will put the onus on the Iranians to negotiate. One of their demands was a ceasefire within Lebanon, essentially between Hezbollah and Israel. They made this a sticking point for reopening of the Strait of Hormuz. So now the onus is on the Iranians to make a concession. If President Trump, if this ceasefire holds, if it is true, if the Lebanese and Hezbollah and the Israelis can agree to hold their fire, then the Israelis have to come to the table and make a concession.
You know, that's an important point that you made, that the ceasefire is, of course, between Israel and Lebanon, but the person announcing the ceasefire is the American president. We haven't yet heard anything from the Israelis yet officially, because remember, the American president and the Iranians agreed for a ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The Iranians claimed that the ceasefire included Lebanon as well. That was rejected by Netanyahu. In your assessment, what do you think is going to be Netanyahu's reaction to the fact that it is Donald Trump who's announced the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah?
I believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu will accede to it if Hezbollah ceases fire on Israel. The Israelis would like to de-escalate within Lebanon, but there's a lot of questions. The Israelis are currently occupying portions of southern Lebanon in the effort to establish a buffer zone. Will this ceasefire require the Israelis to withdraw, or is this just a cessation of hostilities and leaving conditions on the ground? But if President Trump wants this ceasefire, and if Hezbollah is willing to stop attacking Israel, I do believe that Prime Minister Netanyahu will get in line. It is in Israel's interest to have a pause in the fighting. They've been going hot and heavy against Hezbollah, against the Houthis, against the Iranians for quite some time now. They could use a military pause to regroup.
Right now, at this moment, the Israelis have carried out a large-scale incursion inside the Lebanese territory. The Israelis have stated, as a matter of official record, that they want to take over territory in southern Lebanon as far up as the Litani River, to treat that as a buffer zone. For this ceasefire to hold, in your assessment, do you think the Hezbollah will agree if the Israelis do not withdraw from the southern part of Lebanon?
I think that we can have a temporary ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah for the short term while this is all being sorted out. The problem is that Hezbollah has used the area south of Litani. It's a Hezbollah stronghold. They've used that to attack Israel. When Israel and the United States launched their operations against Iran, the Hezbollah initiated attacks against Israel. So they're the ones that started this whole operation. So I don't think in the long term that Hezbollah will accept an Israeli occupation of southern Lebanon. So that will have to be something that has to be sorted out. But the only way to ensure that Hezbollah isn't using southern Lebanon as a base to attack the Israelis, for the Lebanese government to assert control. And this is something the Lebanese government, the Lebanese military, has refused to do since UNIFIL was created in, 2005?
Now, one of the conditions that the Israelis said that they wanted to achieve through this war on Lebanon is to try and disarm Hezbollah. They initially asked the Lebanese government to do it, which in turn had not been able to accomplish this task. In your assessment, do you think the Israelis will now hold fire at a time when Hezbollah has not been disarmed, which was the stated Israeli objective in this war?
Yeah, the Israelis themselves cannot disarm Hezbollah. It has to be from the Lebanese government, the Lebanese military. The problem that many see, and I'm among those, is that this essentially would lead to a civil war within Lebanon. Hezbollah is part of the government. It holds over 30% of the seats in its coalition in the government. It's infiltrated the security forces. For the Lebanese military to go in and disarm Hezbollah, I don't see Hezbollah willingly surrender their arms unless they feel that they've been significantly defeated, and they have not been militarily defeated.
Now, there are many moving parts to these ceasefires that Donald Trump has announced. Firstly, the ceasefire between the United States and Iran, and now the ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah, both of which have finite ticking clocks that are currently underway. In your assessment, was this ceasefire something that Donald Trump has imposed on Israel? We still haven't officially heard from the Israeli Prime Minister yet whether he'll agree and adhere to this ceasefire. Is this something that Trump wants to happen so that he can proceed with a second leg of negotiations with Iran?
Yeah, I do believe that's correct. If President Trump is the one initiating it and pushing it, I do believe that's the case because he does want talks with Iran to proceed, then he would certainly be putting pressure on Prime Minister Netanyahu. I do believe, though, that the Israelis would be happy at this juncture for Hezbollah to just halt its fire against Israel. Again, the Israeli military has been at war for a long time. Its forces have been extended in conducting operations inside of Iran, fighting against Hamas in Gaza, fighting against Hezbollah, and occasionally fending off Houthi attacks. The Israeli military can use a reprieve. A ceasefire would not be the worst thing for the Israelis. So while President Trump may be initiating this, pushing this, I don't think it's a real hard sell for the Israelis.
My final question to you, Mr. Roggio, is this. Now, Donald Trump has said in different media outlets that he's given interviews that the Iran war is probably coming to an end. He said this to his favorite news channel, Fox News. But on the other hand, you also have the Wall Street Journal that has reported that while the American president is talking about drawing down this war on Iran, he's moving more infantry assets and other military assets to the Middle East in preparation for what appears to be another major campaign. There 10,000 soldiers apparently are now being moved towards Iran. In your assessment, what do you think is to be read into this mixed messaging that is coming out from the American president?
Yeah, I don't think it's mixed messaging. I mean, you're going to hope for peace, but prepare for war. Again, we're in a state of a ceasefire or a truce at the moment, but this war hasn't ended. The deploying additional troops is necessary if President Trump wants to put additional pressure on the Iranian regime, and it gives him options if this ceasefire does not hold, if the Iranians do refuse to reopen the Strait of Hormuz.
All right, we'll have to see as to how things unfold. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Roggio, for joining us with that perspective then.
Thank you very much.